Good afternoon from sunny Miami. This is Dr. John Bennett with the Med Gadget channel. We do hangouts with the people behind the tech. And today we have the honor of having Matt Patterson, the president of Airstrip, along with various other guests. First, I'll introduce the guests, and then we'll turn it over to Matt. Good day, Gene.
Hi, how are you, John? Thank you for coming, everybody, and welcome to Med Gadget.
Thank you, Gene. Welcome. And Jason, a new guest.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Jason, could you tell us what you do and where you're at, etc.?
I'm a 35-year solo practice OB/GYN that stopped clinical practice a couple of years ago, and I'm primarily involved in research right now.
Welcome, Jason. I'm sure you'll have a lot of good questions for Matt. And good day, Matt. Could you please introduce yourself and on to the presentation?
Sure. Hi, my name is Matt Patterson, the president of Airstrip. I'm a physician by training. Background as a Navy doctor, head and neck surgeon. So if you'd like, I can go ahead and just provide a brief overview, a little bit of background on Airstrip, and then we can open it up to a little bit of open-ended discussion, and happy to answer some questions and take the discussion wherever you'd like, if that's okay, John?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Matt.
Sure thing. So a little bit of background about me and kind of my role and how I came into Airstrip. I have a couple things I can show as well that I'll switch to. So my background is clinical. I left clinical practice several years ago and wanted to devote my professional life more towards systemic transformation of healthcare delivery. Found myself at McKinsey & Company doing management consulting for a few years after leaving clinical practice, and worked with quite a few large health systems around the country doing both strategy, operations, consulting, and I was involved in Airstrip about 4 years ago, came to the company, and was involved in the transformation of the company from doing point applications that were very well known and established for mobilizing various monitoring environments in the hospital to more of a platform offering for Airstrip One, and that's what we're doing today. And I can talk a little bit about how that transformation went and some of the things that we're doing to apply our technology. So I'll go ahead and share a screen here, and hopefully all the technology will work. So Airstrip's been around for a while. We're kind of one of the older guys in the block when it comes to digital health. We started over 10 years ago, and we were most known as being the first FDA-cleared mobility software for mobilizing monitoring waveforms, for doctors and hospitals. And where we started was in obstetrics. So this was even pre-smartphone. We're talking about Palm Pilots and Pocket PCs. And what we did was we were able to take the live streaming waveforms of fetal heartbeat, maternal contraction patterns, and maternal data coming from the perinatal units, and put that in the hands of obstetricians in a variety of different environments wherever they were. And so, the application was an instant hit because it really solved for the two different consumers of our product. From the health system side, they were pleased because this was a big way to help mitigate risk for their patients in the perinatal units. It was also seen as a big as a big nurse satisfier and a big patient satisfier. And then our other group was the consumer was the doctors themselves, and it was a huge win for them because it represented the ability in real time to see what was going on with their patients. And it personally made the difference between them not coming or coming into the hospital at odd hours of the night when they would know truly what was going on. So we expanded from there, and we built another couple of point applications to mobilize cardiac monitoring, 12-lead ECGs, and then expanded there into live monitoring of critical care and telemetry environments, pretty much anything that could come across a monitoring environment. And around that time, we were awarded a methodology patent for taking raw data from body sensors and then transmitting that to a mobile device and re-rendering waveforms in near real time. So we were having great success in the market and expanding out our functionality. We are contracted now over 500 hospitals, about 400 of them live, and roughly 1 in 6 babies in the United States has Airstrip being used at some point during the delivery of that child. And what we realized a few years ago, and this was right around the time I joined the company, we got some great feedback from our clients and from our end users. And what they said was essentially, why stop where you are now? Why not expand what you're able to bring in so that, number one, we can see greater context of health data. Number two, we can communicate securely and more effectively about what we're seeing. And then number three, we can go ahead and start taking action. And so what we decided to do is, instead of continuing to make point applications, we expanded into a single application called Airstrip 1. And what Airstrip 1 is it's a single native application on a variety of form factors that connects in near real time to essentially any clinical data source. So now we have the capability to use all of the robust API approaches that we did to connect across disparate systems for monitoring. We can now do for electronic medical records, both in and out of the hospital, diagnostic quality imaging, HIPAA-compliant secure messaging, video conferencing, out-of-hospital body sensors, you name it. So that for a clinician, and now increasingly even for consumers, one application can be an overlay to all of the disparate systems that may be in place both in and out of the hospital. And our primary focus is on making the most seamless and elegant workflow in the moment of care for those individuals. And we do a lot of that in a very, very unique way. The way we connect via API to all of these sources is much more robust than traditional HL7 or CCDA approaches. We basically are getting full access to the entire database, historical and current, from the moment of connecting. And so we're able to provide not only that acute thing that the doctors and nurses need, but we're also able to build a more robust context around that data point, so it allows clinicians to collaborate in real time.
Excuse me, Matt, your first slide is still on. Do you want the first slide to be on?
So you should be seeing now something that says a platform to enable optimal workflows. Is that correct?
I'm still saying the first slide, Airstrip, Healthcare Without Boundaries.
Oh, the title slide.
Oh, there we go. There you go. Okay.
Okay, now it's keeping up. I think maybe I have to switch in and out. So basically, this is just to symbolize our ability to pull from multiple disparate systems and focus mostly on the workflow. I think that what we've seen in the evolution of healthcare IT, starting from when the monitoring companies, the monitoring vendors had a lot of market power with the advent of digital data to begin with, that transition to electronic medical record companies structuring that data, storing that data, that transition to analytics companies doing a lot of analysis retrospectively on that data to try to mine it for meaning. Now what I think that you're going to see in the marketplace, and what we've been focused on for our entire evolution, is on the workflow for clinicians and consumers. And so we're primarily focused on how that data and how those analyses are brought to bear in a single moment to allow people to make decisions when time is of the essence, and that can be both for acute care situations in the hospital, but now increasingly that is for chronic disease situations out of the hospital. So expand a little bit more on what we do within our platform. So our platform is set up to accommodate all of these disparate data sources across multiple different vendors. And so we had a lot of challenges that we had to solve in order simply to display, let's say, a heartbeat, or heart rate coming from GE versus Philips versus Neon Coden, or a potassium value coming from Cerner versus Epic versus Meditech. And so we had to build our own clinical domain map to accommodate all of those different data points and organizing them in a meaningful way. And what we learned to do is organize, structure that data, and normalize it according to existing semantic nomenclatures wherever they exist. So for example, if it's laboratory RxNorm, or if it's problemless SNOMED CT, etc. And where there aren't established nomenclatures, we created our own, to accommodate what we could, and to make sure that we could show a single view that basically was agnostic to what was behind the scenes, what data stack we were plugging into, what vendor. And what we realized very recently over the last year or two was not only was that visualization extremely powerful, but now increasingly we have business development and client partners coming to us, asking us to stream that data out in near real time into other areas and other locations like enterprise data warehouses or real-time analytics engines, and then serving up the results onto our platform and our visualization tool. So the way that I like to describe what Airstrip is very, very good at today is kind of the bookends. We're extremely good at getting at data in a near real-time streaming way that others cannot. And this is not only electronic medical records, but monitoring sources, body sensors out of hospital, you name it. We're extremely good at serving that data up in a normalized, structured way to third parties. And then we're good at the other end of the spectrum, which is we're great at making user interfaces that are simple, elegant, easy to understand for both consumers and clinicians to use. And so what we've been finding is a lot of partnerships are coming in to fill in the middle. And what the middle tends to be are real-time analytics that are acting on that data and producing insights which then can serve up to our end users' workflow and make whatever we're displaying a lot more meaningful to them than it otherwise would be. A couple of examples of that, we're working at the University of Michigan, for example, where we are streaming real-time patient monitoring data as well as EMR data into a third-party analytics stack. In this case, we're using IBM Infosphere Streams, but we're agnostic to analytics stacks. But there it's IBM, and we're applying a proprietary algorithm that was developed by the University of Michigan on the upstream detection of hemodynamic instability. And so they have a proprietary algorithm which is primarily based on waveform data that can detect when somebody's going to become hemodynamically unstable far before clinical signs are present. And so that's currently streaming data and undergoing a clinical validation study that we have in place there. And a second example on the obstetrics front is with Dignity Health. We're streaming data from their perinatal systems to a SaaS platform, and they are conducting their own analysis internally with Dignity Health to develop novel algorithms and detection programs for detecting fetal compromise ahead of overt clinical signs. And then when that is established, we're going to apply those in real time going forward, and it'll feed into Airstrip 1 so that the clinical end users will get those notifications. So just some examples of how the platform is really developed from a point application where we were just connected to one system to then we connected to multiple disparate systems for visualization to then we built in layers of secure communications and context, and finally now we are streaming data in near real time to other third parties, applying analytics across a variety of different service lines to include both acute and chronic disease out of hospital, and therefore our user interface and what ends up in the hands of users is actually much more streamlined, but far more impactful. And just a quick kind of screenshot, a sense of how we approach user interfaces. So we have a tile-based architecture, and these tiles can be populating from multiple disparate data sources, all doing live calls and responses. So if you think about the difference between us and, let's say, an HIE approach, where an HIE would collect and store data in a third location and then interact with that new data source, we're making the live calls on the fly to the existing sources of truth across multiple disparate systems, and we're able to bring all of those data points into a tile-based architecture. And then as you drill down any one of these tiles, you can get into some of the more proprietary things that we do from a streaming waveform standpoint or analytics standpoint for both in and out of hospital environments. So that's just kind of a little bit of a conceptual view of how we approach the far end of the bookend, so to speak, on user interface. So that's the quick overview, and I'm happy to open up the conversation to however you guys want to take it or take some questions.
Sure, Matt, thank you very much. You know, I first heard about Airstrip way back, and I didn't realize once I started researching, talking to you, your company, you guys grown a lot and changed a lot. It was just a simple app before, but now it's a whole platform of things. And now the obvious question to me is, how can you be interoperative, but all these EMRs can't be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Gosh, the world of interoperability has changed so much just in the last few years. I think our standpoint, it's interesting. If you think about where we started as a company, interoperability has actually always been at the heart of what we've done. So right from the very beginning, we had to plug into multiple disparate perinatal systems to solve OB workflows for our clients. Some of our clients had multiple different perinatal systems even within a market. But for the end user doctor who might have privileges at several of these hospitals, it was extremely important for that end user to have a familiar experience with mobility across those. So we've been doing mobility from the very start, and actually you could argue that solving mobility for some of those very proprietary, organized ways of approaching data sharing was much, much harder because the FDA was involved as well from a regulatory standpoint. That nut was actually a little bit harder to crack. Lately with the electronic medical records, it's not so much of a technical barrier as much as it was a political barrier, and kind of just having a very siloed mentality and kind of data blocking that was happening. But we're seeing that really thaw up in the marketplace and really go the right way. And we bring our clients to the table. And so it's never Airstrip simply pushing for something to happen. It's always in response to a very well-defined use case that our clients are bringing to the table where EMR data is relevant, and we feel like accommodating that is the right thing to do. So when we bring them to the table and ask the right questions and show the EMR companies the way that we approach our APIs, it's very much aligned with the way that these systems were architected for sharing data to begin with. So we love the things that are going on with, for example, the Center for Medical Interoperability. We're big supporters there. We're big supporters of the FHIR movement. It's just that the truth of the matter is the technology for FHIR and some of these other standards that are coming out is just years and years away from being widely implemented. And we are able to solve these problems today using existing tools that are available if they would simply just be exposed to our APIs. And we're having good success with that so far with our clients.
So are you going into the EMR business soon?
No, not at all. That's the last thing that we want to do. And when people, we depend on, if you look at our business model and you look at our application, our entire business model is dependent upon the excellence of other systems being in place. With the exception of a company we purchased a couple years ago called Sense4Baby, which is an actual hardware device that's the only FDA-cleared body sensor for monitoring high-risk pregnancy in out-of-hospital home settings, etc. With the exception of that, we don't create any data. So our whole value proposition is based on creating elegant, useful workflows which address clinical business problems for health systems and make life easier for doctors and patients. So we love to collaborate with the EMR vendors as well as the monitoring vendors, and we're very much dependent on them to be successful. And we certainly don't want to create another EMR system. That is not what our solution is intended to do whatsoever. We're solving for discrete moments in time, discrete collaborations, and situations where multiple disparate data sources need to be brought together to make a relevant clinical decision.
Okay, Gene, do you have any questions?
Yes, Matt. So you say that your clients are EMR vendors or hospitals. Can you clarify who you work with directly?
Sure. Our clients are exclusively at this time health systems. So our client base is large hospital systems in the United States, and then increasingly with our acquisition of Sense4Baby, we're starting to do things more direct to consumer or direct to physician groups. But that's a very, very new business for us. So we are not business to business. We are right to the health system client. That's our client base.
I see. So when you come into a hospital system, do you, they want you to connect a new, a monitoring device that you haven't connected before. What does it take on your end to make that happen?
Yeah, so what it usually takes is to get the specifications from the vendor in question, and then we match up our API approach to that. And then, depending on the complexity of it, it's usually measured in several weeks kind of project to establish connectivity and put the new API in place. there are two things that we've gained. So one is that over the years, we obviously focused on the monitoring partners, which comprise the vast majority of the market. So on the monitoring side, we cover well over 80%, if not 90% of the market of existing vendors. But what we're most excited about recently is the host of novel body sensors that are coming out to solve what the monitoring companies can do, but with just a smaller footprint and a cloud-based approach. And for the examples where our clients are using Airstrip for telehealth applications, that could be very, very appealing. So for example, we have a system set up in place where we're connecting EMR, monitor, and imaging for a very, customized kind of telehealth solution for ICU. And let's say that hospital now wants to bring that package solution out to a rural health partner, which really doesn't have much infrastructure. A small hospital that really needs consultations every now and again but doesn't have the infrastructure. We can now start bundling a collection of body sensors that are cloud-based and almost bring a little bit of a hospital in a suitcase type of approach to those hospitals, bypass the traditional infrastructure methodologies, and be able to provide them a robust telehealth solution for a fraction of the cost of what traditional bunker approaches would do.
Jason, do you have any questions or comments? You got to unmute, Jason.
I'm getting warmed up to this. Well, this is a pleasure meeting you and listening to your progression. I think it's fair that I just explain my interest. A long time ago, I consulted with Core Metrics. And the core metrics that I was interested in was their SpectraTel system, which you could run over laptop and Microtech Motorola phones. So we would hook up to patients at home with those monitors. And then it progressed, and we started hooking up with analogic monitors out of Boston over smartphones. And I had an engineer that wrote that software for me. So I was literally monitoring women across the country on that system. And in the process of doing so, we came across a discovery. The discovery is the babies die at night. They die between 2 and 4 in the morning. So you may remember the old Matria system and the way that they were following premature labor. Well, the idea of prenatal care is to stop the babies from dying and the mothers from dying. Well, now we know it's not random, and now we know why they're dying at that time in the morning. The researcher that gained insight into that as we were documenting it, over 1,000 losses, is a Dr. Olchese out of FSU. And what he discovered was melatonin is what drives the contractions at night. And so when you have an intensification of the contractions, the babies that are compromised, regardless of causation, die. Now what he's done recently with Brigham Women's is he's brought in a blue frequency wavelength goggle invented by NASA, and when you turn on the blue light, it stops the premature labor. So the potential is you can stop the death. You don't die unless you're contracting. So in the process of OB, what you're talking about, there is a way to monitor these people and to possibly prevent stillbirth if you can get to it soon enough. But I won't go into those details with you. I just wanted to give you an insight about it.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Oh, it is totally fascinating. People have missed it by a mile. And the other idea is what I was driving at with the home monitorings was to create home prenatal care, which can be done now. You don't have to go to the office anymore. You've got iPhone-based ultrasound. You've got iPhone-based monitors, which may be you. And so all you need now is the framework for patients to do that. And we did that a long time ago. We called it Maternet. And we put it on the internet through Pregnancy Institute. And we ended up having 50 people jump in that we didn't even contact that were trending their vital signs and fetal movements. So that was just a prototype experiment, because in the end, please be aware, mothers will do the job free. They don't miss a day. So now you have the potential to trend all the parameters and see a break in trends a lot faster than your once every 4-week prenatal visit. And that's where I think it's going. And that's probably the most important thing I can tell you.
Thank you for that. Yes, we have some good collaborators, especially at the University of Utah, who's been working with us since we acquired Sense4Baby and helping us to understand the best and safest path to take that product to broader use. In Europe, in particular, they're much more comfortable with out-of-hospital care in general, especially in the Netherlands, and so we have great traction there, and that's just where nurse midwives and home-based care is extremely common. There's increased interest in that in the United States. And of course, there was a lot of bad things that happened with uterine monitoring remotely, back in the 90s, et cetera. And so we're very mindful of kind of the limitations of the technology. But certainly for high-risk pregnancy, non-stress tests, periodic measurements, we feel like this is just a very obvious place to start. And we've seen a lot of interest over the last 6 to 12 months. And I agree. I think that the coverage we got on the Apple event, we were fortunate enough to be invited up on stage for the Apple Watch 2.0 release, and we were presented the concepts of Sense for Baby and kind of connecting consumers and doctors in real time. And I think that Apple event, what it really represented and why we saw so much resonance in the market is exactly what you just described. I think it was a very concrete example of showing an individual connect with a decision-making caregiver, in this case a doctor, in real time, remotely, around what I call grown-up medical data, as opposed to recreational medical data like steps and calories and things which are kind of very ancillary. This was around grown-up medical data, so real FDA domain kind of regulated data that was happening, and where you had a concerned individual who wanted answers, and that can be provided now across space and time safely and effectively. I think you're absolutely right. I think we just saw a ton of interest of people who were otherwise having to travel very, very long distances, or otherwise would have very difficult access to timely care where we can make a difference. It was very encouraging.
One of the best models is out of Japan, if you've ever seen their models, because they can't get the women out of the mountains. So they do a lot of this.
Yeah, that's I'll look into that. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that.
Matt, do you foresee a lot of your growth in the coming years to be chronic care? Chronic monitoring?
I do think so. And so what's happening to us most recently, the analogy that I use is that once we developed the platform that we did, and it had the breadth and the connectivity and the way that we could bring the data together, it was very interesting. We found ourselves in the proverbial waiting room of really large IDNs, waiting to answer on big systemic enterprise kind of initiatives around managing medical loss in a risk-based environment. So hospital systems taking on risk in collaboration with payers and physicians, and wondering how they were going to do that, let's say starting with bundled payments, et cetera, et cetera. We found ourselves in the proverbial waiting room of those kinds of opportunities with the likes of some mega, multi-billion-dollar analytics and consulting firms, and they all looked at Airstrip and said, what the heck are you guys doing? Why are you here? What business do you have, being in the waiting room with me about these kinds of problems? And we said, God, I don't know. We just built the software. We think it's great, and we're hopeful that somebody can use it for some good. And the truth of the matter is, those large firms have really taken us under their wing in the last year, and we've forged some very, very important business-to-business partnerships, a couple of which will be going public press releases in the coming months. But we see this as an absolutely huge growth opportunity because a lot, I can speak from the consulting world myself, having done it. They're extremely good at scoping out massive problems, solving for the workflow needs, and solving for how data needs to come together to make impact. But what they traditionally would leave behind is a set of recommendations or a PowerPoint deck. And now they're thinking more about, well, what if we left behind an incredibly powerful software platform that can actually implement all of these things that we are recommending and can put it in the hands of role-specific workflows for doctors or nurses or navigators or consumers or whoever. And we're saying, oh my gosh, Airstrip could absolutely do that. We're a tile-based architecture. We're very modular in the way that we approach things. We can plug and play with analytics. Please use our software. Brand it for what you need to. And so given the long sales cycles in healthcare and the challenges, of keeping a C-suite audience in health systems, we see this as an incredible growth opportunity. And to answer your question directly, yes, it is all about out-of-hospital chronic disease management, value-based reimbursement methodologies, etc. But we're not out selling ourselves as that. We're out selling ourselves as what we do best, which is as this technology platform to enable all these things, and we're leaving it to some of these big partners to kind of bring us into those situations. So that's been a really, really exciting approach for us over the last 12 months.
Okay. Gene, do you have any comments or questions before we
close? I wanted to ask you how big is your firm? Like, well, how many developers do you have? I guess.
Yeah, so I can answer. We're a private company, so there's certain things that we keep to ourselves. But I mentioned some metrics that we can share. So almost 400 hospitals on contract and 500 hospitals. 500 hospitals on contract, about 400 live. We have large enterprise-wide implementations at places like HCA, Dignity Health, large IDNs. Recent go-lives at Cleveland Clinic and Memorial Sloan Kettering, where we're going to be expanding out as well. From a company standpoint, we're sitting at about 111 employees right now. The company was founded in San Antonio, Texas, and that's where our corporate headquarters is. That's our largest office, and there's probably upwards of 50-plus folks in our development shop. And that's our largest department by far. We have a good base of operations here in San Diego. That's where a lot of the leadership is now located. So we got about 20 people here in San Diego. We have our analytics and our help desks and support set up in Nashville, Tennessee. So we got another 10 to 20 people there at any given time, and then we have a small office in Chicago, which is to house some developers who are local to that area. So 4 offices overall, about 110 employees, and the majority of them in the development space.
You personally, Matt, you made a career change. That was a pretty big career change from medicine to computers, or the computer business. What have you always been a computer nut?
It's funny. I never imagined in a million years I would be doing what I'm doing right now, but I was a computer nut as a kid. In fact, I was sharing with somebody that my first job, I was a Navy brat growing up, and I saw always around Navy bases, but my very first job, I was 13 years old. I'd get working papers from the county, otherwise it wouldn't let me work. I was actually a salesman for Apple Computer. So it was when the Macintosh first came out, and I wore a little suit and tie, 13-year-old kid working at the Newport Navy base in Rhode Island selling Apple computers. And I'll tell you the story is very short, but I loved Macs, and so all I would sell is Macs, and they were incredibly expensive at the time. It's the 80s, really, really expensive, and the Apple II was still out. And the regional director came by to visit me. And first of all, he was floored because I was a 13-year-old kid and he couldn't believe that I was working for him. But then second, he asked me, he said, why do you sell so many Macintoshes? And I said, well, that's the future. That's it's point and click. It's a graphical user. This is the best thing in the world. There's no future in this other thing. And he said, Matt, let me explain to you something about margin. Margin is where we sell something for a certain price, but we have to buy it for another price. And I know that the Macs are really expensive, but our margins are actually low on the Macs. They're actually really good on the Apple IIs. So it would be great? It'd be great if you could sell more of these Apple IIs. That would be really good. And I paused for about a minute, and as a pure kid, right, I looked at him a minute later. I just said, yeah, but the Mac is the best computer. That's all I got to tell. That was my first lesson. My first lesson in sales. I was a bad salesman. I was all about the vision and the mission. So yeah. But yeah, I've always been into computers, but more importantly, from a healthcare standpoint, yeah, I just got an epiphany one day, and this was actually before Don Berwick and the Triple Aim, and people don't believe me when I say it, but it's true. I just got a voice in my head one day that told me that my professional career should be devoted towards delivery transformation and improving access and quality for everybody, especially starting in the United States. I became very committed to that. And when I reflected on what I was doing as a Navy doctor, I was not going to be able to get there one patient at a time. So I quit after I had that realization, sitting on a beach down in the Caribbean on a long vacation. And I came back, quit my job. They couldn't believe it. And since I was in the Navy, they drug tested me and psych tested me on the same day. They thought I had lost my mind or that I was on drugs. I passed both of those tests. And then I promptly sat down at my desk and I typed in, this is another true story, I typed in, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. and in Google. And up came, Google chats about management consulting and McKinsey, and next thing I knew, I found myself at McKinsey. And I promised myself that when I made the jump from clinical medicine, that I would always be devoted towards solving for the delivery improvement of healthcare, and that no matter who I worked for, and as long as I was committed to that mission, that was the most important thing. So Airstrip was a perfect step for me after consulting to bring me into that, because I think that we make incredible tools to help bring about effective change and improvement in healthcare delivery. Yeah,
it's a great time to be in medicine if you like computers. There's so much happening in so many areas. And Jason's new to the fold to our team, and I think he's gonna see with this platform, Matt. We meet doctors from all over the world. With this Google Hangout platform, it's an excellent way to meet people in medicine, and Gene too. We're kind of showing this tech too. It's a great way to get to the people behind the tech, and there's just really no borders with this computer and this platform. There's no borders. You can go almost anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic. Well, I thank you very much, Matt, for taking the time. Any comments, Gene, before we close?
No, thank you, Matt, for coming. Thanks, Jason and John, for being here.
Okay, thank you. Jason, any comments or?
Yeah, I would like to talk to you about your OB database and what may be missing in it. And once I chat with you about it at a better way, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I would be careful with what you're working with right now.
Yeah, I welcome the conversation. Anytime, I'm happy to collaborate, so I really do appreciate that.
Okay, very good. I'll just close right now. We can chat afterwards. So thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you, John.